On quiet streets where the wind carries whispers of forgotten souls, a chained life waited silent, unseen, and barely surviving. But sometimes, all it takes is one person who refuses to look away to change everything. This is not just a story about a dog. It's a story about wounds you can't see, cages you don't notice, and the kind of love that demands nothing but heals everything. Before we begin, tell us where in the world are you listening from. Drop your city in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe if this story touches your heart. The late autumn air in Willowbend carried a bite, the kind that crept beneath jackets and whispered warnings of an early frost. The sun hung low behind streaks of burnt orange clouds, casting long shadows across the quiet, rural roads of this southern Missouri town. Trees stood bare like old men stripped of dignity, and the last few leaves rustled aimlessly across gravel driveways. Inside a modest log cabin tucked on the edge of the woods, Thomas Blake sat at his wooden table, hands wrapped around a chipped ceramic mug of coffee that had long gone cold. He wasn't drinking it for the warmth, it was more of a habit, something to occupy the silence. Thomas was 53, broad-shouldered but slightly stooped from years of physical work and an emotional weight that clung to his posture. His face was weathered with fine lines, framed by graying stubble and short-cropped dark hair peppered with silver. There was kindness in his eyes, but also a guarded sorrow that rarely softened. He lived alone since the passing of his daughter Lily 5 years earlier, a tragedy that had stolen the light from his life. Lily had loved animals rescued strays, volunteered at shelters, talked to birds. After her accident, Thomas had shut himself off, finding fleeting purpose only in fixing up old furniture or helping local shelters when they were truly desperate. The phone rang. Not the cell, he rarely answered that, but the landline, the one only a handful of people had. He let it ring twice before picking up, more out of curiosity than obligation. "Mr. Blake? It's Emily Monroe." The voice on the other end was young, brisk, with a sense of urgency barely concealed behind practiced professionalism. Emily Monroe worked for a local nonprofit rescue group, New Hope Animal Outreach. She had only met Thomas once during a donation drive, but his name came up often in conversations among dog trainers and shelter staff. "I'm sorry to bother you so late," she said quickly, "but we've got a situation. It's not good. There's a Doga male Labrador. He's been chained for nearly 6 years in the backyard of a property just outside town. The owner's moving and called animal control, but the dog won't let anyone near. He's completely feral at this point. He tried to bite the last guy who approached." Thomas didn't answer immediately. He glanced toward the coat rack where Lily's old denim jacket still hung, untouched, collecting dust. He set the coffee down. "I'll meet you there," he said. 20 minutes later, Thomas's truck crunched up a dirt road that ended near a sagging chain-link fence. Emily stood waiting beside a beat-up animal control van. She couldn't have been more than 27, small-framed, with red curls pulled into a messy bun and a clipboard tucked beneath one arm. Her jacket was too thin for the cold, but she didn't seem to notice. Her face was flushed, more from concern than weather. "Thanks for coming," she said, extending a gloved hand. "We're back here." They walked around the side of the house, where the grass gave way to churned mud and scattered debris-broken tools, rusted buckets, and an overturned plastic kiddie pool. And there, tethered to a rotting post by a thick iron chain, was Sonny. At first, he didn't move. Then a low growl rumbled from his throat, deep and warning. Sonny was a large male Labrador, probably around 7 years old. His coat, once likely a soft golden cream, was now mottled with grime and caked mud. His ears were scabbed from fly bites, and his paws were raw from pacing the same tight circle over and over again. His ribs showed beneath the filth, but it was his eyes that froze Thomas where he stood. They were not eyes of aggression. They were eyes of terror, of confusion, of betrayal. "He's been out here since he was a pup, Emily whispered, standing beside Thomas. No shelter, no walks. The owner said he never had time for him, just fed him and left. Now he's moving across state lines and didn't want to take him. Thomas didn't speak. He knelt, slow and deliberate, keeping his hands low and eyes averted. Sonny lunged forward, the chain jerking taut with a loud metallic snap. Saliva flew from his bared teeth, and his bark cracked the silence of the yard like thunder, but Thomas didn't flinch. Emily tensed, instinctively stepping back, but Thomas stayed still. I know that look, he said softly, more to himself than to her. Seen it before. He wasn't talking about another dog. In his mind, for the briefest flicker, he saw Lily sitting on the front porch swing, arms wrapped around her knees, refusing to speak the day after her best friend died in that car crash. The same wild, locked-away grief lived in this dog. Sonny continued to bark and growl, but Thomas noticed the slight tremble in his legs, the uncertain flick of his ears. The dog wasn't just aggressive, he was scared, deeply, irreparably scared. Thomas stood and took a slow step back. We're not doing this tonight, he said calmly. He's not ready, but I'll come back tomorrow. Emily looked surprised. You think he'll ever let anyone near? I think, Thomas said, glancing once more at Sonny. He's waiting for someone who doesn't give up. As the wind picked up and dusk settled into true night, Thomas walked back to his truck, the silhouette of the chained dog still visible in his rearview mirror. He gripped the steering wheel tighter than he needed to, not out of anger, but because something inside him had stirred, something he thought had died the day Lily did. Hope. The next morning brought a brittle chill that clung to every surface like a warning. Frost glazed the edges of fallen leaves, and the sky remained a stubborn gray, refusing even the faintest hint of sun. Willowbend stirred slowly, under the weight of winter's approach, its streets still damp from the overnight mist. Thomas Blake arrived earlier than he intended. Part of him couldn't sleep, the other part didn't want to. He parked his pickup just beyond the rusted fence, cutting the engine in silence. For a moment he simply sat, watching his breath fog the windshield. Then, grabbing a worn blanket and a thermos of chicken broth, he stepped out and made his way to the backyard. Sonny was already awake. The Labrador stood at the edge of his chain's reach, ears erect, tail stiff, his golden cream fur still matted and streaked with dried mud. When he spotted Thomas, the growl returned not as vicious as the day before, but low and persistent, like a warning without conviction. Thomas didn't walk straight to him. Instead, he sat down 10 feet away, unfolding the blanket on the damp ground, moving slowly and deliberately, careful not to make any sharp movements. He poured the broth into a small bowl, the steam rising into the cold air like a peace offering, then pushed it slightly forward with the end of a stick. He didn't expect Sonny to come near. It wasn't about the broth. It was about presence. "Morning, fella," he said in his deep, gravel-lined voice. "I'm back, just like I said I'd be." Sonny snarled, lips curled just enough to show teeth, but his bark never came. His eyes tracked Thomas with the same mixture of fear and disbelief, but something was different. His paws didn't retreat this time. They stood planted, hesitant, as if unsure whether to fight or flee. From behind the house, Emily Monroe appeared again, wrapped in a heavier coat this time, her red curls hidden under a knit beanie. She walked quietly, her eyes wide with curiosity, and stayed back without needing to be told. She respected unspoken boundaries. "He didn't eat after you left," she whispered as she joined Thomas, crouching a good distance behind him. "But this morning, he's more alert. It's like he was waiting." Thomas gave a slow nod. "He's building a map," he said, "of who we are, what we want, whether we're danger or not." "Do you think he remembers love?" Emily asked quietly. Thomas didn't answer right away. He was watching Sonny, whose eyes were fixed on him now not. Emily, not the bowl, but him. After a long pause, Thomas replied, "I think he remembers being forgotten more." Sonny paced the edge of his tether, back and forth like a lion in a cage. His growls softened to whines every now and then, especially when Thomas spoke in that low, even rhythm. He didn't speak in commands. He spoke in memories. About Lily, about the dog she once rescued, how she had named it Pickle and insisted it slept on her pillow. About the time she got sick and held onto that dog like it was her heartbeat. Emily listened, her arms around her knees. She didn't interrupt. As Thomas spoke, Sonny's posture began to shift. His ears tilted slightly forward, picking up on tone more than words. The chain didn't rattle as violently when he moved. And when Thomas reached slowly into his coat to pull out a soft piece of chicken, Sonny didn't bark. He didn't approach, but he didn't retreat either. "You know," Emily whispered, "my boss said we might have to put him down if we can't move him safely. Said he's too far gone." Thomas didn't react, but his eyes darkened. He placed the chicken gently on the grass, halfway between them, then leaned back. "He's not gone," Thomas said. "He's just locked in. There's a wall inside, built over years of silence and hunger and cold nights. Walls like that don't fall from yelling. You wait, you breathe, and one day, it cracks." Sonny inched forward, not enough to reach the food, but just enough for Thomas to notice. His nose quivered as he sniffed the air. Then, suddenly, he froze and backed away, emitting a sharp bark. The movement was quick, but not panicked, more reflexive than terrified. Thomas didn't move. "It's okay," he murmured. "You're okay." The Labrador's tail flicked once, not wagging but not tucked either. A neutral signal, a ceasefire. Thomas stayed with him for 4 hours, occasionally speaking, mostly silent. At one point, Emily brought him a sandwich and left it on a stump without saying a word. Her respect for the moment was quiet, instinctive. She was observant, but not invasive, a rare quality. As the day wore on, Sonny finally crept forward enough to snatch the piece of chicken and retreat to his corner. He didn't eat it at first, just held it in his mouth, eyes still locked on Thomas. Minutes passed. Then, with visible effort, he began to chew. Thomas smiled faintly. By the time he stood to leave, the sun had dipped behind the hills, painting the clouds with soft amber. He didn't walk directly towards Sonny. He backed away slowly, murmuring something about coming back tomorrow, same time. As he reached the fence, he glanced back. Sonny was sitting, not lying, not pacing, just sitting watching. For the first time since this rescue began, Thomas saw a question in those eyes. Not distrust, not threat, a question. And questions were the beginning of trust. By the third day, the yard no longer felt hostile, felt paused. Not safe, not warm, but quieter, like a place on the edge of deciding whether to forgive or to forget. Frost still lined the edges of the grass, and the bare trees swayed gently in a breeze that smelled faintly of wet earth and pine. Thomas Blake arrived just before sunset, the golden light slanting low across the fields as if the sky itself were holding its breath. His old canvas tent was rolled up in the back of the truck, along with a sleeping bag, a small portable heater, and a tin of leftover grilled chicken from the night before. He wasn't just visiting this time. He was staying. Sonny stood near his post as always, tail stiff but no longer tucked. His golden cream coat, though still filthy and clumped, caught the light in a way that softened the harsh edges of his frame. His eyes locked onto Thomas the moment he stepped through the gate, but this time there was no bark, no growl, just a long, watchful silence. Thomas nodded. "Evening, partner," he said, setting his gear down about 15 feet away and slowly unrolling the blanket. He didn't make direct eye contact, didn't raise his voice. He just moved, slowly, predictably, respectfully. Sonny's body remained coiled tight, but his ears twitched at the familiar voice, and he didn't pace. After settling into his usual spot, Thomas retrieved a grilled chicken thigh from the tin and placed it gently on the ground halfway between them. He slid it forward with a long stick, then leaned back and folded his legs beneath him. "Smells better than it looks," he said with a faint smile. "Or maybe that's just because I skipped lunch." The minutes dragged. Sonny didn't move, but he didn't turn away either. His nose twitched, his eyes darting between the meat and the man who had been coming every day, never demanding, never chasing, just waiting. Thomas began speaking again. Not to command, but to narrate. He told a story about a fishing trip he once took with his daughter Lily to Lake Pomme de Terre, where she refused to bait her own hook, but somehow caught the biggest catfish of the day. He laughed softly, the kind of laugh that breaks just before it turns into something else. As he spoke, Sonny inched forward not a step, just a shift in weight. His paws pressed deeper into the ground, his nose tilted toward the scent. Thomas didn't acknowledge it, just kept talking, now about a dog he had known in the Marines named Jackalmine as a snake to anyone else, but melted at the sound of the harmonica. "Sometimes the angry ones just want the quietest songs," he said. Then it happened. Sonny took a single, deliberate step forward. He froze, muscles tensed as if expecting punishment, then took another. It was no more than a yard gained, but to Thomas, it was a continent crossed. The dog paused at the chicken, glanced once at the man still sitting motionless nearby, then snatched the meat and retreated faster than he had approached, but not in panic, just habit. Thomas exhaled, slow and steady, as if the yard itself might shatter if he moved too quickly. Sonny lay down again near the base of the wooden post, chewing the meat, eyes never leaving his new visitor. From inside the house, a curtain twitched. A new figure appeared, Judith Clark, the homeowner's sister, a woman in her late 60s with close-cropped silver hair, dressed in a heavy flannel coat and faded jeans tucked into mud boots. She was tall and wiry, with sharp cheekbones and a no-nonsense expression softened only slightly by concern. Judith had taken over the property after her brother left town and had called the animal group when she realized Sonny had been left behind. "He's never done that for anyone," she called softly over the fence. Thomas turned and gave a nod. "He's thinking about it." Judith stepped out with a metal thermos and handed it to Emily, who had returned to check on the progress. Judith's voice dropped low, just above a whisper. "I thought about cutting that chain myself once, but I was afraid. Not just of him, but of what it would mean to see what we'd done to him. I think we all were." Thomas didn't respond. He didn't judge. He understood the kind of fear that grew in silence, and comfort the fear of facing your own cruelty by omission. As the sun disappeared beyond the ridge, painting the horizon with a violet glow, Thomas pitched the small tent on a patch of dry grass. He lit the portable heater, placed it near the flap, and rolled out his sleeping bag just inside. Judith offered the use of the guest house, but he refused. "I told him I'd stay," Thomas said, "and trust starts with keeping promises." That night, he lay inside the tent, barely dozing, listening to every shift of dirt, every twitch of the chain. At some point after midnight, he realized something had changed. Sonny wasn't pacing. He wasn't growling. He wasn't barking at shadows. He was watching still and alert, the white of his eyes just barely visible in the dark. And then, without any fanfare or warning, Sonny lowered his head to the ground between his paws, tail resting beside him, body curved like a question mark slowly settling into a period. He didn't sleep, but he didn't tremble either. And Thomas, beneath layers of canvas and old grief, closed his eyes to the sound of stillness. The morning arrived cloaked in a silver hush, as if even the sky held its breath for what was to come. A soft mist hung low over the fields of Willowbend, curling around fence posts and settling into the folds of the earth like a blessing. Thomas Blake unzipped the flap of his tent slowly, careful not to disturb the stillness. His joints ached from the cold and the hard ground, but there was warmth in his chest, a sense of anticipation that made him forget his discomfort. He glanced towards Sonny, The Labrador was lying exactly where he had been the night before, beneath the old wooden post. But now, the dog was alert, head raised, watching Thomas with quiet intensity. No barking, no growling, just a gaze wide, wary, and full of unspoken calculation. Thomas knew today had to be the day. He stood, brushed the dew from his sleeves, and approached with the same measured calm he had practiced since their first meeting. In his right hand, he carried a special leasha, long, padded catch pole used by professional handlers for aggressive or unpredictable animals, but he wasn't going to use it to restrain. Not today. It was only a precaution. Emily Monroe had returned early, stepping quietly onto the property. She wore a thick parka this time, her cheeks already pink from the chill red curls escaping from beneath her wool beanie. Her presence, though familiar now, was cautious. She stayed behind the fence, next to Judith Clark, who had come bearing a tin of hot coffee and a worried expression. Judith wore her usual faded flannel coat, boots caked with morning mud, arms crossed over her chest like a guard against regret. "He hasn't barked all morning," Emily whispered. Thomas gave a short nod. "He's listening, more than Thade's waiting." He knelt again just out of Chain's reach and slowly extended the leash, letting it rest on the ground. He didn't move towards Sunny. Instead, he spoke gently, as if recounting a memory only they shared. "You've done the hard part, pal," he said. "Now it's our turn." Sunny stood, hesitant. His legs trembled slightly. His tail stayed low but not curled under in fear. Thomas reached into his coat and retrieved another piece of grilled chicken, laying it on the ground halfway between them like an unspoken promise. Then, slowly, he reached for the chain. It was thick, rusted, and stained from years of weather and time. It hung from the metal collar with a cruel familiarity. Sunny tensed, the whites of his eyes showing for the briefest flash. But when Thomas made no sudden movement only, a slow, deliberate lift of the chain Sunny did not retreat. Thomas placed a hand on the clasp. "Okay, big guy. Let's let this go." With a soft click, the chain came free. It slipped to the ground with a clank that seemed to echo far louder than it should have. Sunny flinched, stepped back 3 paces, and stopped. He didn't run. He didn't growl. He stood in place, ears pulled back, body tense but not aggressive, only confused. The moment lingered. Then, Sunny looked at Thomas. He took a step forward, and then another. The leash remained on the ground, untouched. Thomas stayed kneeling, hands open and empty. Sunny lowered his head and sniffed the air close enough now that his breath stirred the loose threads on Thomas's flannel sleeve. And then, without warning, Sunny pressed his cold nose to the back of Thomas's hand. It was brief, gentle, so soft it almost could have been imagined. But it was real. His tail wagged. Not frantically, just once. But it wagged. From the fence line, Emily gasped audibly and covered her mouth with both hands. Her eyes welled instantly. "Oh my God," she whispered, voice shaking. Judith took a slow breath, her weathered face cracking into the barest smile. "Well, I'll be damned." Thomas didn't move. His voice was low, almost reverent. "That's it. That's the sound of something breaking and something beginning." Sunny remained close, eyes searching Thomas's face as if asking, "What now?" The chain lay on the ground behind him, lifeless at last, a relic of a life he no longer had to carry. Thomas finally stood, slowly, and picked up the leash, but didn't try to attach it. Instead, he stepped back toward the truck. "Come on, friend, let's take a walk." And to everyone's astonishment, Sunny followed. No growls, no panic, just slow, tentative steps on sore paws. It wasn't grace. It was courage in its rawest, most vulnerable form. They walked the perimeter of the yard, Sunny always a few feet behind, occasionally stopping to sniff at leaves or dirt, but never bolting, never pulling away. When Thomas opened the back of the truck, Sonny hesitated at the tailgate. Thomas didn't coax or push, he just waited. After a long moment, Sonny stepped forward and climbed in. Emily couldn't stop crying. Judith had to turn away to wipe her eyes. "You staying at the shelter?" Emily called, voice still trembling. "No," Thomas replied. "I'm staying with him." He climbed into the driver's seat, glancing once in the rearview mirror. Sonny sat there, alert but calm, the tension in his frame slowly unwinding. His tail moved again, another single wag. Thomas smiled. Some chains never rust. They're made of fear, silence, and memory. But today, one had broken. Not with force, but with patience. Not with fear, but with love. The shelter sat on the outskirts of Willowbend, a modest facility nestled between rows of leafless oak trees and sloping hills that turned golden in the afternoon light. It wasn't large, just 3 wings, a fenced-in yard, and a red tin roof that clanged softly whenever the wind picked up. But inside, it was quiet, clean, and full of care. There were no bars, no metal cages stacked high. Just open kennels, warm bedding, and the gentle voices of people who understood that healing didn't happen in haste. Thomas Blake stepped through the main doors with Sonny walking beside him, no leash, no coaxing. The Labrador's golden cream coat still needed washing, and the pink scar along his neck from years of chain wear was visible. But his steps were calm. His tail swayed gently, and his eye sockets, burning with fear now, held curiosity. The front desk was manned by Claire Peterson, a woman in her early 40s with soft eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She had dark brown hair pulled into a low ponytail and wore a navy blue vest with the shelter's name stitched neatly over the heart. Claire had worked there for nearly 12 years and had seen animals come in broken in ways she couldn't always describe, but few stories had moved her like Sonny's Plas. She stepped out from behind the desk and crouched low. "Is this him?" she asked, her voice steady, eyes moist. Thomas nodded. "This is Sonny." Claire extended her hand slowly, palm up. Sonny didn't lunge, didn't shrink away. Instead, he sniffed her fingers, then turned back to Thomas with a faint wag of his tail. "He's choosing," Thomas said quietly. "One moment at a time." They set Sonny up in a large kennel by a window, filled with a soft blanket and a bowl of chicken broth. Thomas didn't leave. He rolled out his sleeping bag just outside the kennel door, resting his back against the wall. That night, and for several nights to come, he stayed. Staff members offered him the cot in the break room, but he declined. Sonny had spent his life sleeping alone, tethered to cold ground. Thomas wasn't going to let him face these new days without someone by his side. During the mornings, Thomas and Sonny would walk the yard together slowly at first. Sonny sniffed the grass like it was foreign soil, lifted his face to the breeze like he had never truly felt it before. His paws, once worn from pacing circles in the mud, now stepped with growing confidence. When they passed the other dogs, Sonny didn't growl. He watched, he listened, and he began to trust that not every bark meant danger. In the afternoons, Sonny would nap beside Thomas on a blanket in the sun. Sometimes, Emily would stop by, sitting on the edge of the porch with a notebook in her lap. She sketched quietly, occasionally glancing up at them. One day, she showed Thomas her drawing. Sonny curled at Thomas's feet, their shadows stretching long behind them like old friends walking in step. On the 4th day, Claire entered with adoption paperwork in hand. "We've already had 6 inquiries for him," she said, smiling softly. "People are moved by his story, want to give him a second chance." Thomas looked down at Sonny, who was resting his head on Thomas's boot, tail thudding lazily against the floor. "I'm afraid they're too late," Thomas replied. "I think he already picked his home." Claire's smile deepened. "So, you're officially his now?" "I was his the moment he touched my hand," Thomas said. Later that evening, the shelter staff gathered for a small celebrations, just cookies, coffee, and soft music playing from a dusty speaker. Emily brought a squeaky toy in the shape of a chicken, and Sonny surprised everyone by not just accepting it, but playing. He nudged it with his nose, then pounced, ears up, tail wagging in wide arcs. It was the first time anyone had seen him play. Thomas watched from a bench in the corner, his hand resting over his heart, where a worn photo of Lily stayed tucked in his shirt pocket. He wasn't sure if Sonny reminded him of her, or if he simply recognized a similar grief in the dog's sullen ache for a world that had once been warm, then vanished. But in that moment, watching Sonny chase the toy across the shelter floor, Thomas didn't see pain. He saw return. He saw a being who had forgotten how to live and was now remembering. A week later, they left the shelter together. Thomas didn't bring a leash. He didn't need to. Sonny walked close, his pace in rhythm with Thomas's steps, stopping only when Thomas did. They rode home in the truck. The window cracked slightly so Sonny could stick his nose out into the wind. He closed his eyes, letting the breeze carry away whatever remnants of chains still clung to his mind. When they arrived at the cabin, Thomas opened the front door wide. "This is home," he said. Sonny stepped inside. Not hesitantly, not fearfully, but with the confidence of someone who had finally been invited to belong. Sometimes, healing doesn't come in the form of medicine, or miracles. It comes quietly, in the slow rebuilding of trust. Sonny didn't need a new leash, a fancy kennel, or a clean start. He needed presence, patience, someone who saw past the snarls and silence to the heart still beating underneath. And Thomas, carrying his own invisible wounds, found in Sonny not just a dog, but a reason to hope again. This story is a reminder that chains come in many forms, some made of metal, others of memory. But when we take the time to truly see one another, to sit in the cold and wait with kindness, even the most broken spirits can rise again. If this story moved you, please give it a like and share it with someone who needs a little hope today. And let us know, where in the world are you listening from? Drop your location in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next story from Fearless Paws.